I promised in my last video that I would talk to you today about why studios feel safe in raging their fans. Since the last time we talked, the term fan baiting has now entered the discourse around stories. Now, the idea of fan baiting is that story corporations, when they know they have a bad product, will cast diverse people so that when racists or sexists inevitably attack, they have a defense, they have a shield. As I suggested last time, this is just the beginning of what's going on, right? Because that's a good story, and I think it's a true story, but I think there's a bigger picture here. And fan baiting, which we discussed in the last two videos, essentially, even though we didn't use that term, is only part of that story. Remember, diversity casting typically happens before the studios know that they have a bad product. So stick with me, I might just blow your mind. Remember, if this sounds useful to you, to like, subscribe, comment with any questions you might have. I'm Logan, and this is Intensely Casual. So right at the beginning of the Guide to Good Story, I talk about the book The End of Detroit by author Micheline Maynard, and about how Detroit in the 70s, the thing that led to the downfall of the big three automakers, was that they had built this assumption that people had to buy their cars, that there was no other choice. So in a healthy business relationship, businesses make products for their customers that serve the needs of their customers in exchange for money. But when a business thinks someone has to buy their product, they stop worrying about the money and they start looking for other forms of value they can get out of making and selling their product. In the case of the big three, because they presumed that customers had to buy these cars, these companies didn't really focus on making cars that customers wanted. They made cars that suited them and their interests and their needs. For instance, there was a famous joke back in the day that GM was basically just a bank that made cars, that happened to make cars. The cars were actually, where GM made their money was on the loans they made on the cars, not so much on the cars themselves. This is something called financialization that we'll get to in a little bit. On the other hand, you had a company like Ford, which specialized in building cars for huge fleets, think rental companies, government operators, that sort of thing. And then individual retail customers second. Okay, so in this case, the needs of other stakeholders were put ahead of the needs of the primary customer. And just to be clear on this point with Ford, you might think, well, the fleets were the primary customer. No, Ford actually made their money selling to individuals. The fleets just allowed them to achieve economies of scale. Something similar happened with mortgage-backed securities around the time of the financial crisis. One of the reasons that so many bad loans were made was that the banks making the loans were no longer trying to make money on the loan itself. Rather, they're trying to make money on selling the loan. And since you're making money on selling the loan, you want to make as many loans as possible so you can sell as many loans as possible. Your actual concern about the quality of the loan or the credit worthiness of the borrower, they went by the wayside. Something similar right now is happening with the airlines and kind of explains the airline trouble we're having at the moment, because airlines don't really so much make their money these days off of flying you around, but on selling frequent flyer miles to credit card companies who want to offer those miles as a reward. In other words, the actual air travel is just an excuse to sell a product related to it. In all of these cases, what is lost is the direct consumer experience. That's what suffers. Now, in the 20th century, story-making corporations were very, very sensitive to the desires of their customers, because every business model around selling stories required selling to as many people as possible. Books, in order to be successful, had to sell a lot of copies. Live theater and movies, they had to sell tickets. TV, you might think, well, they weren't selling anything directly to people, and that's true. But what they were selling was advertising, which depended on lots of people turning up. So those TV ratings really were about, did we create a product good enough that it attracted people to watch our product and that they liked it enough to sit through the commercials? DVD made this an even better deal for the film and TV studios, because you could sell the same product multiple times and you could make a much larger margin on selling a DVD to a passionate fan, leading to a golden age of high-value content. They really wanted to satisfy their customers because there were a lot of ways in the late 20th, early 21st century of story that these companies could make money on the customers liking that story directly. Now, this had two advantages for the audience. First of all, if people liked a product, then they were likely to get more of that product. Moreover, it was crystal clear which stories were popular and which weren't. You couldn't hide bad box office numbers. Too many people had access to them. Same thing with bad ratings. Because ratings were used to set the rate of advertising, it essentially was public information. But streaming has changed all this. And don't get me wrong, I love streaming. At Intensely Casual, we're not like, oh, things are terrible now, we need to roll the clock back. But we do realize, just like Ari Weinzweig of Zingerman's taught us, that solving a problem leads to a better class of problem. All right? And so that's what we're getting at here. Streaming has been great. It has given people easy access to stories in a way they never had them before. It was a real boon during the pandemic. But streaming has led to the financialization of stories. And I'll give you a great example. In all this kerfuffle about the Rings of Power, I've heard several people say, I don't know how this is ever going to make its money back. It was never going to make its money back. Never. Because they aren't charging anything for Rings of Power. The way a streaming service works is they sell you not access to a given story, but they sell you access to a collection of which any new content is just part of it and may not even matter to you. If you're a huge fan for DC, right now the streaming service for you is HBO Max. No questions asked. It doesn't matter what else they make. That's the one that has the products you want. See, movie theaters and major TV networks, or what people often think of as the legacy networks, they essentially only run new content. So it is important to them that that new content be high quality. But streaming services are more like a syndicated station. What matters more than the new content is the overall quality of the library that they're marketing to you. So this makes new content largely irrelevant to a service if they have a large library. This frees story-making executives and storytellers to tell the stories they want to tell, not just the stories you want to hear. It allows them to treat stories like a commodity to be traded, just like the airlines and the mortgage-backed securities were, just as the big three treated cars. And this is a key point about fan baiting. Okay, no doubt these people are deliberately baiting the fans, but you have to realize that extremists love to troll. That this fan baiting is not just a shield against mediocrity or low quality. It is, in fact, just something they want to do. Moreover, they get to feel good about making the world a better place. These are the goals that they have put ahead of your satisfaction, because your satisfaction doesn't really make them money. And let's be clear, dissatisfying you can make them money. If making a Rings of Power that traditional Tolkien fans hates gets more people to subscribe to Amazon Prime, it can make Amazon Prime money even if no one watches it. That's a key thing you have to realize. The stories are commodities. They've been financialized. They are no longer important just as something to be consumed as themselves, but as an object to be traded and argued over in the culture wars. But the real lesson of the big three, that although the competition starts small, it can be a giant slayer. People didn't turn to foreign cars because they hated an American made or they hated America, but simply put, they wanted a car that would work, that would be designed around their needs, not the needs of the people selling them the car. That's what the money's for, to quote Mad Men. The purpose of this channel isn't to complain about the modern state of story, but to solve the better class of problem that streaming and franchise storytelling have brought to us. What I want to help you learn to do is how to find those stories that are designed to meet your needs. Because guess what? One of the big advantages of streaming, or one of the big weaknesses, depending on how you look at it, is what I already told you. It's about the library they have. There is over a century of film available to you right now. Almost every book ever made is available to you right now. Almost every television show ever made is available to you right now. None of this was true 20 years ago. You don't need the new things to meet your needs if you know how to find what will meet your needs out of everything that's already been made. And this is not to hate on the new, but in order for the new to have value to you, well, it has to be designed to give you value. Now, if that sounds useful to you, then I hope you subscribed, because next week we start on solving the problem.